Hey everyone, Paradox just showed off roughly 1 hour of gameplay of Imperator Rome in a recent livestream on their Twitch channel, which has also been uploaded to their YouTube channels. Now, as someone who's been keeping an eye on the game, covering the recent developer diaries, I've mostly just been focusing on delivering information about the game with very little opinion. But after we've just seen an hour of gameplay, and more if we count the various YouTubers who've had some preview access, I wanted to do more of an opinion-focused video. Now, to summarize my thoughts generally here at the top, I'm liking the look of the game, but I'm extremely disappointed with how antiquated some things in it are. After playing Stellaris, an extremely visual Paradox game, where almost every aspect of the UI has some sort of visual representation, whether it be planet management, pops, invasions, ship design, diplomacy, and events, everything has really distinct artwork to bring that game to life. Not to mention, even the battles are played out visually for you to kind of sit back and watch. I think in many ways, Imperator Rome is a step back from that design philosophy. Not everything has a visual representation, and most things have small UI icons or buttons instead. Now, while long-standing Paradox fans will be used to this, and many won't care what it looks like, I do still think it's a poor decision when trying to capture any new audiences and make the game more inviting, especially now since the graphical fidelity of the map itself is so impressive. Now, I want to be clear, I am by no means saying that they should make the game more simple or lose any depth, only that they should make it more visually appealing and accessible. I fear, however, it is a bit too late at this stage for such a radical request. Oh, and I should mention that I have also played Europa Universalis 4, I've played Hearts of Iron 4, and I've played Europa Universalis Rome as well, so it's not just Stellaris that I'm really making comparisons to, though I do think Stellaris is the strongest user experience of those games. Now, in terms of gameplay, there are a few warning signs that I'm starting to see when it comes to combat, building, and the use of power resources. Now, it could all be fine really, I haven't played the game, but we'll get to what I mean a little bit later in this video. So I'm going to go through some of the most interesting aspects of this live stream. For those unfamiliar, the guy on the left is Rodrigue, the community manager for Imperator, and the guy on the right playing the game is Johan, the game director. So in the very beginning we get to see the menu. I think it looks really nice. Then we see the nation selection screen where we get to choose any nation on the map to play with some recommended nations, and I'm assuming what's recommended here is based on the difficulty setting that you've chosen. Now the year is 304 BCE and we see each nation's type of government, their religion, their ruler, and more details about them before starting, so you get a pretty good idea of what you're even up against in your immediate vicinity if you wanted to check out other nations. Now, when starting, you get a nice bit of artwork and description for your nation and starting conditions. Now, it goes without saying really that the map looks spectacular, and there's tons of various map modes to cycle through to get different visual representations of things. A really great one is seeing the supply limit of a region at a glance, and then if you select an army, it'll change depending on the size of your army, so that kind of lets you know where your army can be and what regions can sustain them. Now, for those who don't know, big armies cannot sit in badly supplied regions without taking attrition, so this really helps visualize where your certain army can stand without taking attrition. There's another interesting one for barbarian hotspots. I haven't gotten too much info about this, but barbarian invasions will sort of generate out of these areas until you wipe them out. Now, I'm not sure what happens if you choose to play as one of these nations, we'll have to wait and see. We also get to see a nice province mode. That shows you at a glance your provinces, the current policies, the loyalty, and the pops in a given province. You can even change the policies from here. It's a really great addition. Something you're going to be doing a lot of is choosing your imports and exports, and we can see that here. This again is vastly improved since a game like EU Rome. You get to see all the resources as grouped by what they do, and then if any country has them available and is willing to trade, there'll be a little green tick next to that resource. Then you select it and choose the country you want to import it from. It seems like it's super easy. Now at this point, Johan and Rod were gearing up for war, so they started recruiting to their army. There's another great addition. You can select recruit to the army. Queue up all the infantry, and they'll be built across every available city within a province and then march their way to the army. This saves the player a lot of time microing going into all the different cities and recruiting one by one, and with how there's usually 10-ish cities within a province, it seems like you can raise 10 units really fast if you have the money simultaneously. Next we take a quick look at the government screen, and it still bothers me that there's only one consul who serves 5 years, and then there's a predictable heir to the consulship. It's really something I hope they look to change with a free update as soon as they can figure out a design for it, because it very much feels like a sort of oligarchy instead of a republic. But other than that, it's still cool to see the seats, the breakdown of support, and the different offices available. I think it's a nice layout here. So after some fiddling around, recruiting armies and sorting out the government, war with Etruria was declared. It was a war for superiority, which is kind of like a show of force, where territorial demands can be made later when you want to end the war. Now this is classed as a no CB war, which means no casus belli or legitimate reason for going to war, giving you a hit to stability, which you can then correct with religious power. So you can still go to war with anybody you want, whenever you kind of want, with no real problems. You just take a hit to your stability if you don't have a legitimate reason and cause for doing so. The war declaration screen lets you see who will join you and who you can call in, so it's pretty standard stuff for most Pardos games, but it looks good. Now about 17-ish minutes into the live stream, we see our first battle in combat kind of play out. Rome has 19,000 troops led by a general with 7 martial, and that's denoted by the numeral on the banner to the right. And Etruria has 11,000 troops led by a general with 6 martial. The battle will take place on flat terrain, and before it happens, we can see the incoming battle and the pros and cons of what will happen. The only benefit their army had was higher morale. Once combat began, we could see the enemy's chosen tactics. They chose hard defense, which countered Rome's all-out assault, giving them a plus 10% modifier to damage dealt, I think. Then the battle line starts off with just skirmishers in a sort of first phase, and the commanders begin to roll their dice to see exactly who's going to do more damage or kind of get the better of who in each engagement. So both commanders rolled a 2, and Rome's skirmishers fell back and were replaced with infantry. The heavy infantry kind of came in on the second line. Then Etruria won the rolls still a few times, but Rome's infantry still beat out the missiles overall, and Rome won the battle. However, Rome did lose more men. They lost 5,700 men, and Etruria lost 4,600, probably because their rolls were better and their damage modifiers counted for more. Now, while I can largely understand, I think anyway, what happened there, it's still really confusing to look at. I mean, I've watched that a few times and I'm still trying to piece together what's going on. You don't really know when the phases are going to happen, and you can't really see flanks or get a sense of what's going on the ground. Now, I would love to see a larger kind of grid table instead of just 2 lines. Why you can't see your second line or reserves, or the line of people who've already fought and then left the battle, I think is really strange. I think there should be an active zone line, which is what we kind of have right now, and then a reserve zone line for the next phase of troops to push in when the gaps are made, and then a kind of a routed line where for units that have fallen back and will not be in the battle any further. At least that way visually, you could see what's going on a bit more, and you could make the decision to hold out for a lucky roll, or realize that your reserves simply just won't be enough and then decide to fall back. I mean, ultimately, I'd love to see a sort of a 2D Football Manager style radar battle taking place. Even if it's just 2 simple lines of blocks going forward to meet, with flanks occurring, it would really do a lot for the immersion of it. And it would make it much more appealing for people who aren't overly familiar with these games and just don't play on the fastest speed. For instance, Rome's all-out assault tactic could have been seen visually with a big push forward, while the Etrurians' hard defense would have been a bit more static. It would have been kind of cool to see. This screen just hasn't really changed in the last 10 years since EU Rome, and it's a bit disappointing to see that so little has changed. Now, after a few battles, Johan spotted some mercenaries on the map and decided to recruit them. I think this screen looks awesome, and the fact that mercenary armies are present on the map is really interesting, because you know that the enemy could then also hire them too, potentially, maybe if you didn't get them first. I could imagine situations where you'd buy up the mercenaries just to prevent the enemy from buying them. After paying the mercenaries up front, they then have a heavy upkeep cost, and they also need to be paid to be disbanded, which is another really cool touch. Later on, we'll actually see that these mercenaries will get low loyalty. Johan's going to run out of money, the war isn't going well, and then they're going to miss their payments, and they actually defect and flip sides, which is very cool. With the money getting low, Johan goes into the economy screen and straight up just converts some of the power resources to gold, with the prices fixed at around 25 power for about 70 gold. Which, make of that what you will. I'm sure it's subject to balancing and changes anyway, but I personally just do not like that you can neglect your treasury and then buy money with abstract power resources. I understand it's a last resort and you need the power for other things, so it's not like you're going to do it often, but to me it just kind of broke me out of the experience a bit. The other uses we see for spending power are spending oratory power to endorse a political party more, essentially just buying seats instantly, and then when converting pops from tribesmen to citizens. This one I really didn't like. You spend 10 religious power to do it. So here's the gameplay for converting culture, religion, or class types after you're done some conquering. Take a look at this.
They are not all that great when you're
a civilized nation.
Yeah, because they're not happy with civilization levels in a country, they get really upset, and they, in the first place, they don't really produce all that much compared to citizens or used up pretty much all our... No tribesman.
So Johan spent a lot of religious power to do that, which I'm sure does affect his ability to do other things, but I just can't get over that really. It just sucked the life out of the world to be able to convert people like that instantly with no repercussions. I had someone ask me, how would I do it instead? And for me, well, I haven't thought this through too much, but I would generally have them slowly assimilate to the dominant culture of the province that they're in. Remember, a province is a collection of cities, so if you owned a few cities, but not the majority, then your pops would assimilate towards the dominant culture, religion, and class of the province. But you could always use governor policies to help convert pops over time, which could cause a little bit less productivity and unrest, and that's in the game already. A contested province would then give you a reason to try and own a full one, encouraging kind of that natural expansion. And if the province was shared with an ally or a subjugated nation, then I think a bonus would have to be applied to allow your culture not to be affected by allies too much, because you don't want to be trying to encourage you to fight them. Now that's a lofty little idea right now, but you see where I'm coming from, you know? I think practical changes and effects are better understood and more immersive for players than abstraction, and abstraction should really only be used in limited quantities. But like I said, I haven't played it or seen a full campaign play out, so maybe it is fine, and maybe when you get bigger, these things just kind of become a necessity for gameplay. Plus, this is all designed and set already, so I'm not really expecting it to change, I'm just voicing my concern on it. Also, clicking convert, spending X amount of points, and then it just works with no issue, it seems really arcadey for this type of game, and it doesn't really fit with the complexity of everything else, but we'll have to see. Now that's sort of everything I wanted to mention in terms of gameplay. I've already kind of covered everything else through developer diary recap videos over the past few months, and like I said in the beginning, I'm liking what I'm seeing, although the stream did move pretty quickly and it was kind of hard to take it all in a bit. So I would recommend just slow down a bit. We haven't played this game yet, and though it is similar to EU4, a decent amount of people are going to be interested in this game that may have missed EU4 or just been intimidated maybe by the amount of content for it and never picked it up. They want to see this game and be introduced to it from the ground level, and then as the streams go on, you can obviously speed up and skip some events because they're probably going to be following along at that point. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is something that I touched on a bit, was how antiquated the game can feel in certain aspects. Not all aspects, but just certain aspects. For me, this mostly comes down to the event message system. Now, whether it's a death, peace, marriage, trade, or any number of things, the same type of message appears. It's a little scroll with what I would consider developer console-like messages. And when I say console, for those who aren't familiar, often a developer console is used in Visual Studio or whatever programming software they use to output information for a developer while they kind of debug the game. You'll place messages around to sort of keep track of data behind the scenes for yourself. So the messages on display here are often like these console log messages. Check this one out. This is when you get peace. It reads, "Herald from the Latin regional power of Etruria. My console. Accepted. Are generous. Peace offer. Terms. Etruscan Etruria to Rome." So that's your notification of peace, you know, the war has ended. There's no celebratory image, no cheers, sounds, or anything like that, just a flat piece of broken up text, which, by the way, you might say, oh, this is early, it'll probably change. I mean, it could do, but this is the exact same as EU Rome, almost word for word, and that game came out 11 years ago by the same designer, so I just feel like it's not really a primary concern how they deliver on the immersive aspects of a game like this. Now, when a war is waged, you get 10 of these individual messages on who has joined and who hasn't and what trade is stopped. It's kind of ridiculous. I mean, this could all be combined into one screen. Like, you actually get a diplomatic message that could read, "My console, the following have not come to our aid in the war," with, you know, a list of nations and then maybe their flags, and then "The following have come to our aid," with another list next to it on the other side, and you could click the flags to zoom to their capitals, and maybe as well it would tell you like, well, because of this war, this is the trade that has stopped flowing from these areas, and you could click those provinces to then, you know, fix the trade. So basically what I'm asking for is a diplomatic milestone kind of message. When something triggers a chain of events, don't be displaying 12 or 15 messages that you just bat away without looking at them. Display it in one screen and make it look nice. Break it up with some art and some different sections for war, peace, trade, and prisoners and stuff like that. Use icons in the messages to show what's changed at a glance. Now, it's not to say that every event is like this. The more preset and tailored events look awesome. They have some artwork and a nicer dialogue box with characters in place if they're going to be affected. Now, for instance, after the war, veterans wanted some form of retirement. You get a nice picture and some options. Same for religious messages and other events that occur. These ones look great with really, really nice artwork. Now also, if you're the type of player that thinks these events are fine, they work, they serve a purpose, then that's great. They'll really never need to change ever again in future. I mean, they've hit the pinnacle of delivering information if that's what you need to see. But for players that need a little bit more eye candy and more inviting atmosphere, and maybe like to roleplay, an image does go a long way, and some sounds and some atmosphere, and not having like a Windows 98 alert box appear that you can kind of feel like you're playing something new and modern. And like I said, it doesn't detract from the depth of the game. That's the important thing. It just makes it more accessible. Everything's the same, the gameplay's the same, but information is being delivered in a more manageable state, and some aspects of the game have done that, like the various map modes and things like that. Now, the last thing I want to touch on is the UI. The community are pretty divided on this. Some really like the clean marble aesthetic. Some say that the marble was never meant to be this clean white and it should be painted to be more historical. And some people want, maybe a bit more of a wooden trim and cloth and things like that. Personally, I am a little mixed on it myself. I do like the marble look, however, and I like the black and gold outliner they have and the red and gold cloth within the marble. However, for me, the issue is with the text. The text just, to me, does not sit right on top of marble, at least not in the font that they've gone with. Now, some sections of the UI has the marble pushed in a bit and darkened, and I think the text sits much better and clearer in there. When text is on scroll, on cloth, or on panels, it seems to be alright, but against flat marble, it just looks really wrong, like it's just not meant to be there. The black marble tooltips with dark text colors on them can be really hard to read, and I don't think a repeating marble pattern looks good for a tooltip. There's too much detail. But generally speaking, I think it's still pretty clear overall in terms of the buttons and the icons, and I think the more color they add, the better. The red cloth for armies, the gold for mercenaries, and the black government headings, to me they look really, really great. I think the rule when it comes to using this marble is to avoid text just sitting on it and to break it up as much as possible by pushing it in and using color where you can. Anyways, that is just going to be it for some of my opinions on what we've seen so far from Imperator Rome lately. I'll be eager to hear your opinions in the comments below. I know there's a lot of people that don't really necessarily care about the aesthetics as much as me, but I'm kind of hoping that people like that can at least see the benefit to making it look better. And like I said, I would never want them to reduce the depth of the game to make it more accessible. I'm just coming at it from a user experience perspective. Anyways, let me know what you think. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.